thank you also for telling us how perfect script could be, or is, or should be, or was. We also heard that encoding is, or should be, or was perfect. We also heard that writing systems from Professor Kulmas are perfect, or should be, or... So I will continue in this trend and talk about how, about the visual aspect of script. How the visual aspect of script, the legibility of script, is perfect, or should be perfect, or was perfect. Of course, the result is, my conclusion is that that's Utopia. So now that you know the conclusion, I hope you will enjoy the talk as much as these children here. And let's suppose that you want to build a script for Unicode, a font, right? That's what we call it today, not a typeface, a font, right? So we want to design a font which is perfectly legible. What does it take for you to design a font that is perfectly legible? Can you do it? So there will be 12 slides, and in each slide I will present you with a challenge, like Hercules, you know, the Hercules of type design. What Hercules does have to do in order to make a perfectly legible font. The first slide is an experiment, is a new font that I'm working on. It's called Metamorphosis. So I will ask here, it's a little experiment also with everybody here in this room, and I will ask Yanis, what do you read here? Serif. So he's reading serif. Now I will ask somebody at the back of our room, for example. There's a lady there which is looking so intensely. Exactly. So we see something there starting to be different, and probably if you go outside you will only read the sun, like in sans serif, you know. So depending on where you are, the message that this font is conveying to you is different, and also it changes. Huh? That's a new book, new type of book that changes the message. Now, why I am presenting this? I am presenting this because for me it's a metaphor of where we are in legibility research today. And when I'm saying me, it's not me, but what other people who did research, reviews of legibility research said. So after something like 100 years of legibility research, we still don't know if it's the sans serif or the serif is more legible. So the first thing is that epistemologically, you will have a problem in order to do your perfectly legible font, because you don't have the technology as a measurement method in order to know if your font is perfectly legible. Slide number 2. Now, this is my layout, but the equation is coming from Jan Tischold. Jan Tischold, famous German-Swiss typographer from the beginning of the 20th century. He equated Fraktur with nationalism. So here Fraktur, that was a traditional German script, and the sans serif, which is on your right, is a new script of the new typography. And there was a long debate in Germany, should we use Fraktur or should we use Antiqua being the Latin script. But the gist of this discussion was that one is more legible than the other one, but there were no researches on which is more legible. Everything was about, oh, Fraktur, this is my identity. The other one said, no, Latin script, this is modernity. So it was not about legibility anymore. It was about something else. It was about identity, about modernity, about culture, society, and so on. So scripts are overloaded with many, many different things than their basic functionality as conveyors of meaning and legible things. So when you want to do your perfect script, you also have to contend with this problem of overload. Yeah? Because some people say, oh, I can read only Fraktur, like Bismarck, or I can read only Latin script. Now, this is a picture from a restaurant in Yokohama in Japan. It looks very untidy. It's very not Cartesian. And this is the point. Why do we have this drive to make everything perfectly legible? Why do we want to have it perfectly legible? So it also could be that our drive for legibility, improved legibility, hundreds of years since Renaissance, the Italian humanists said we do a better script than before. It could be that this is cultural trait. Something cultural. In Japan, maybe you don't want to do things perfectly legible. It's perfectly fine if they are not legible, perfectly legible. So, this is yet another issue that you have to contend with. Here, what do we see here? We barely can read this. This is an alphabet, a new alphabet from the 60s. So you have A, B, C, D, and so on, and then the 10 figures, 0, 1, 2, and so forth. Well, as a type designer, I like to do this. And many people also in design use this font. It's quite popular for advertising. But this shows the limits for me as a type designer, what I can do. I'm constrained by the legacy. When I have the legacy of whatever script, of Latin script, in this case, I cannot do anything. I cannot make the shape of A in a shape of X, because this is my legacy. So there are limits coming from the legacy with what I can design. Because I can improve legibility by making different characters look very different. But then they are not anymore understandable, which is that identifiable. I cannot identify the character. They are legible, distinguishable, but not anymore identifiable. Here. Now, you see 2 lines of text or 3 lines of text. The lower part is in Arabic script and Arabic language. The upper part, which is a bit more fluid, cursive, is in Arabic script but in Persian script. Now, it turns out that when you write in Arabic script in Arabic language, you have a lot of vertical strokes. So for an artist, this is quite useful because you can make a rhythm, a visual rhythm, based on this statistical property, grapho-statistical property of Arabic language and Arabic script. And this is an example that they used this rhythm. Exaggerated, but still this is a characteristic of many Arabic scripts. The upper part is in Persian. Now in Persian you don't have these vertical strokes which are so frequent as in Arabic. So you cannot use this rhythm. You have to find another one. And this is what they did. They find the rhythm which is more fluid, more different. So it shows an adaptation of script to language statistics. And it shows also something else which is a problem for you as designer of typeface, when the typeface is used for different languages, because different languages have different frequencies and different combinations. So you might make a script or a typeface which is quite legible, but then you change. When you go to other languages, you change completely the frequencies and the combinations, and you lose what you did. So when we have something like Arial or Helvetica, which is a universal, or Times New Roman universal font, yes, it's legible, maybe at the origin in English language. But then, when it moves to other languages, it loses that characteristic. Also, languages change in time. So, if Times was based on fonts, on typefaces from the Renaissance, that's fine. But since the Renaissance, the English language changed a bit. Here you have another problem. What do you read here? You could read disgrazie or grazie, depending. In fact, this is readable by dyslexic people. It's much more readable if, in the case where this huge space between characters would be absent. So in this case, again, we have other problems. We have problems from the human visual system and our particularities. I have my eyeglasses, Yanis has other eyeglasses, and so on and so forth. So what's a perfectly legible typeface or script? Difficult to say, depends. It's not only for typefaces are not only for seeing. I also can touch typefaces, especially if they are in the Roman inscriptions. Very nice. I can touch them on. It gives a feeling of three-dimensionality. And here you see an example, a photo of a Montessori school where this child is learning to read and write by touching. So it's a tactile sense which is also present in script, not only the visual. There's yet another sense which is a kinetic aspect. And the kinetic aspect is very present when we write with handwriting, right? Or foot writing or whatever with the mouse. But it's a biological writing. So when we consider the evolution of writing, the visual aspect of writing, we might also want to look at these other modalities, not only the visual one, but also the kinetic, because we have to produce it. And here is an example of what does that mean. That means that the production, the hand production of script is like a sport. So you can improve, but then if you don't exercise, you lose your proficiency. So here you have to copy this hundreds of times, and then you get more proficient at it. Your script will become more legible, but after 1 week, maybe you lose your competence of writing so legible. This phenomenon characterizes what you could call the bioscript. The bioscript is where the intermediary between the result, the visual result, and my body, the producer, is very narrow. The interface is very narrow. I can write on sand, for example. There's no interface. It's direct between me, my body, and the sand. So that's a bioscript. I can have a bit more of an interface, which is like a pen. But then we have something more complicated, which is a Mecha Script. It's a mechanical script, but it's not only mechanical. Well, in this case, the interface between me, the producer, or the signal sender, and the result is much more thick, this interface, right? I have a robot between me and the result. Now, I say Mecha Script. With Mecha Script, I designate those scripts that are produced with a lot of technology interface, like in this case, like robots. And mecha comes from Japanese, where you have in the animes, you have those robots which are mechas, and they are called mechas, mechanical. And you can even go into such a robot and then drive it. If you read mangas or animes, then you know about it. But if you don't, please go to the biggest library in France, in Brest, and tell your bookstore, or it was library, bookstore, and there you will find these mangas with the mechas. So in Mecha Script, contrary to what we saw with bioscript, there is improvement, a sort of progress. For example, here we have two examples. One is this V, it's a letter V, and it shows an ink trap. The ink trap is a bit more of emphasis in the lower part of the V. So you see that the blue, the arrow, the lower part of the blue part of the V is, thanks. So this one, this is the geometrical, the perfect geometrical form, but the font is a bit more open here. So when you print with such a font, you will get ink here by capillarity, right? So this is done on design by designers so that you get a nice shape at the outcome of the typeface. Another example which you know all about is this this thing here, this Anti-Aliasing. It looks like from far away, it looks more smooth with such technology. It's used on screens. So these are minute details that you work a lot to produce them. But it helps improving the legibility of scripts. So we can say that when the interface, the mechanical or the technological interface between the sender and the script is thick, then we can improve. We have progress in legibility. And here is a discussion, an interesting discussion on this topic of progress in scripts. Because we can ask, if scripts, the visual aspect of scripts, are progressing, are improving over time. Yeah? We have 5,000 years of scripts. Did they improve? If it would be an engineer who would design this thing, he would say, I would like that this improves. So here we see what cognitive scientists say about this improvement. And they say that we have improvement. The Latin script is the apex of the evolution of scripts. It's the best script in the world. How do they prove this? Well, first of all, they take Arial, and they decompose Arial and Times New Roman into segments. And then they look if these segments are somewhere in our visual world. And you see here they take pictures of the visual world, and they sample these pictures, and they look for similar shapes. Right. And they found them. So they say, our script, that's the Latin script, is the best because it matches with our visual environment. So our brain is shaped by our visual environment, and so we are shaping our script based on this visual environment. So this is what they say. Only that you will certainly, each one of you will see different problems here. First of all, Arial is not the only script that exists. There is also handwriting. Maybe it's Futura, yeah, but and a bad Futura actually. And they don't consider the frequencies of these strokes. But more interestingly for me is that you have here a polar bear. Now, what has to do the polar bear with shaping the brain of Homo sapiens? Homo sapiens never saw Homo erectus and so on before, never saw a polar bear. So the people that designed, that created during centuries scripts, never encountered polar bears. Not to mind that these pictures come from the National Geographic. So they are framed, and so on and so forth. Okay, I stop there. And this is the last, my last slide, is an experiment. So I was analytically until now, so I said, okay, I think about how I can design my perfect font. So let's see if I can design it. So I started to design a perfect font. My idea of the perfect font was that each shape should be as different from each other one. So I have a set of shapes and they should be as different as possible. So this is what I try to do when you look at, this is Ugraphia, if you can't read it. But the second character there, this is a G, right? And I try to make it, every length should be different as any other one. And this is, or the R, you have 3 different lengths. So this is a basic idea that I followed. But then I realized that I have to make things also regular. I have to adapt characters to the local environment. So my whole idea was destroyed. So I'm still going towards Utopia. I didn't arrive. I hope one day to arrive there. So I'm saying thank you very much for encouraging me to go there and arrive one day. Thank you.
Any questions? Yes.
One question
legibility is what written language is made for.
Yes.
So you have expression on one side and legibility on the other side. So this is a question in my mind. So if you could just elaborate a little more.
Well, if you cannot read the message, then the message is useless, whatever perfections the writing system and encoding has. So this is why you have to design embodiments of that message which are comprehensible, and this is legibility.
But then again, you have Kufic calligraphy, where you may have a very hard time finding out the message. And
Yeah,
this is again a message.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying, that it's like Fraktur. There were some people finding Fraktur perfectly legible, and others saying I cannot read it. This is a problem, that type designers and script designers say that I create a font or a typeface or a script which is perfectly legible. I mean, just open a description of Times New Roman, you will see that this is what's written inside. It's very legible. Okay, on basis of what? And I'm showing that it's an utopia to think that you can design a perfectly legible script, a typeface or script.
Yes?
But I think legibility is meant on different levels. Legibility means also knowing the writing system. If you don't know the writing system, you cannot read it at all.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter which way of shaping the letters or the characters. So, and you discuss the way of shaping the characters in a writing system, that you really can read it.
Yeah, I presume that you know to read it.
But and Fraktur, if people say, I cannot read Fraktur, I'm not sure whether they cannot read Fraktur. If they don't know the writing system, they cannot read, if they don't know the alphabetic system, they cannot read it, but they cannot recognize every letter.
Yeah, that's...
Basically, they can.
What do you mean by basically?
Statistically.
They can recognize most, not most, but some characters they will recognize.
Yeah, and that's a question of legibility. You want to improve the number of characters which are recognizable,
Yes.
right?
Without time
As fast as possible and with the highest accuracy that you can get.
But I don't know whether this way of writing we can read it in a very fast way.
No, this is what I find out, that this is...
Because it's
No.
It is not regular.
No, it's not regular, it's not irregular, it's illegible.
It is not illegible because I know the alphabet. And if I recognize the system behind, then I can read it. Yes. It is not so difficult. Only at the beginning.
No, but yes, but you have some, you see, you have a hard time doing it. And this is, in computers, or as an engineer, this is what I would say, this is what we are working on, or as a type designer. I'm working that you feel with the most ease to read this thing, right? This is optimality. And this is what legibility is about, to improve to make you at ease, to put you at ease.
We have time for two questions, so David and then Cornelia.
Does it work? Yeah. I just wanted to add something here. So you presented it as some sort of dichotomy. The previous question was sort of contrast. There is an expression and there is legibility. And I think this is for me as a type designer, this is a striking thing, because you are already making an assumption about what is the key message here. What is the message? What is the meaning? So, for example, I could have a completely illegible lettering, which on a candy store, which is done in a script, which looks like a candy bar or something, already indicating something about the store. So the message is being conveyed even without any phonetic analysis going on there, without me actually understanding what is written, as in, decoding graphemes and all this. And I think this is extremely important for graphemics, so we don't, in a way, pigeonhole ourselves into analyzing the shapes purely in a phonetic way. It's been sort of looked at it from different angles.
One would say the media is the message.
Yeah, but now you are speaking not like the psychologists who carry out legibility studies. You see?
Yeah. I absolutely
very
understand your point. I just want to say that expression and legibility are not in contradiction. Often expression is part of the message, and if legibility is getting the message, then
I know,
so,
but exactly this
I'm
is...
not disagreeing with you, I'm disagreeing with
This is exactly one problem in legibility research that, as you know very well, there's very few interdisciplinary research. So psychologists are between them, and they said this is legible or it's not legible, but they don't interact, they don't have this competence of typographical competence or calligraphic competence, or sociolinguistical competence. So this is why if they would take into account, into their legibility assessment, such characteristics, then it would be different. But they don't. They do very little. I mean, you have cases.
Cornelia?
Thank you very much. I just want to make a brief remark here that I think that legibility studies should also include children that are learning to read and have certain characteristic orthography and reading problems. As far as I have been told, there is the type font Comic Sans that works better for children that have this reading and writing problems or disability. And I was just wondering whether our reflections as academics or reflections on typeface design would be able to include people that are not so easily learning to read and write as we have done.
There is research on typefaces for children. Rosemary Sassoon is one example. She's working since many years on developing fonts and studying pedagogy of learning. But there also it's an interesting case because, as you know, there are so many different ways to teach writing and so many different styles in which children are taught, different from country to country, So how come that with so much research, you still develop so many different approaches, visual approaches?
Well, I think as far as I understand, part of the problem is one of perception, of visual perception and processing in these children. And I don't have a complete overview of all these typefaces that have been tried, but there seem to be typefaces that are more helpful with these perceptual problems.
Yes.
And I just wanted to draw our attention to that.
Yeah, yes, there are. They have been designed for this purpose. But the interesting question is why a British script for children is different from a Swedish and a German script for children. It's an interesting question, I think. Is it really a difference in the brain of these children or not? Or the frequencies, what they eat,
Okay, so I think we should stop here.
The short question there.
Okay, a short one.
Just a quick question then. I'd like to come back to this question of legibility of sans-serif fonts because it has implications for the elaboration of literacy primers in Africa. Did I understand you correctly that there is no experimental proof that one is more legible than the other?
There are a lot of papers published on which one is more legible than the other one, but they contradict each other.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
And often they use better methodologies. There was a meta study done by Vlad
Yeah.
in the University of Reading, which just discredited most of them. So we really don't know. So,
Interesting.
But we think we know. I mean, if you are asking a lot of people, they say, "Oh, sans serif is not so legible."
That's exactly my experience.
Right.
Field workers are divided, and everybody's convinced of their own conclusions.
Yeah, it's read this Lund book. It's eye-opening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.